Hey there, my friends. Silouan. Been on the road for a few weeks, from New Hampshire to Phoenix to outside of Seattle and points in between. While I was gone, I've been doing a lot of podcasting, just, to pass the time, listening to podcasts. And when I got home, kind of conversation came up with my wife. And it was about the book of Job, of all things. It was mentioned in church. And I realized it had been a long time since I'd really dug deep into the book of Job. That's why there's a Bible in front of me, which I think might be a first for one of my podcasts. Job is one of the oldest books in the Bible. Some people argue it's the oldest. Who knows? And it deals with probably the most fundamental issue we face as humans and come into grips with God. Or is there a God? And it's the problem with pain. Like, why do bad things happen to good people? That kind of thing. On this trip, I came face to face with it. The speaking I do to first responders, to veterans, as you might imagine, I hear a lot of stories about a lot of bad things that have happened to good people and to innocent people. And for whatever reason in particular, this trip to New Hampshire, where I was doing an event for COPS, Concerns of Police Survivors. They're the organization that puts on Police Week out in DC. They do these conferences around the country called Trauma and Law Enforcement. And it's basically training. What does a police department do if they have a line of duty death? And part of that is they talk about suicide. And I'm one of the guys that does a lot of the training on suicide prevention and understanding suicide. Now, part of what I do when I go to these is I try to show the participants that heavy issues can be talked about. And in fact, people might be scared to talk about them, but they want to talk about them. And when you talk about them, you feel better. You unpack it. And so one of the things I'll do is I'll go around the room and we'll just, start with some light questions. Like, if you could fly anywhere, where would you go? Or what's your favorite memory of childhood? And I really like the favorite memory of childhood because you get a lot of smiles. That no matter where somebody's at, they think back to childhood, and it might be family vacations or family Christmases. And again, sort of referring back to a previous podcast I did about Don't Wait, what are usually the memories from childhood people remember? It's family oriented. It is when they felt safe in a large group of people and it was just all happy. That's what they remember. And then I'm leading up and asking those questions to asking them what was a bad day. And in this particular group in New Hampshire, man, there were some bad days. I lost count how many of those men and women were present to see somebody kill themselves. I lost track of how many of them were there to see a dead kid and the reaction of the parent. You've not seen pain until you have heard the cry and seen the face of a mother who has lost a child and has still not come to terms with it and is looking at you like, what can you do to help me? What can you do to save me? And they can't understand the horror in front of them. Horrible days, many of which to innocent people. And this gets us to Job. Because Job, I guess, tries to explain that. Now, one thing about Job that I've noticed over the years, I remember way back in college when I was at Vanderbilt and I studied math and religious studies. We read a book by Carl Jung, An Answer to Job. And even then, I'm like, man, you sure like putting a lot of your own thoughts and words into Job. One of my pet peeves with the Bible is that although it's pretty obvious as you go through there, like this is poetry, and this is a parable, and this is supposed to be history, and this is a prophet, and this is a narrative. People still, what I find, the things they agree with, they tend to go, oh, that's exactly how it is. And the things they don't agree with, they go, oh, but that's a parable. That's not what it really means. You need to understand the spiritual meaning of it. And, at some point I'm like, it is what it is. It says what it says. What do you get from it? Like if you start like making things up to understand it better, maybe you're getting away from the point. And I've always found that Job's kind of one of those things. So what I thought I would do coming off this trip, having some tough days, in the trainings I did, just sort of wrestling with and carrying the load, at least feeling like I was in that moment for some pretty heavy issues with people. I just wanted to go through Job. My wife and I started to do it, and pretty much right away you go, whoa. So This is going to be a series of podcasts that I'm calling Wrestling with Job. And I'm not even sure how long it's going to take to go through it. And I'm going to kind of do it as if we're kind of like reading through this together and like what comes up. And what I'm going to really focus on is not avoiding the hard questions, not avoiding something that is inconvenient when you read it, but literally looking at it and going, whoa, what is that? Okay. And I think I know where I'm going by the end of this. We'll find out. I could change my mind. I don't want to give you a preview and then change my mind later. But right away, immediately, when you start reading Job, you go, what? Job is, looking through here, I believe it's 42 chapters long. There's 33, 38, I believe it's 42 chapters long. Yes, it is, 42 chapters long, about like that. This is a New King James, double column, kind of big print. I'm a Bible fanatic too. Maybe I'll do a podcast one on that. You wouldn't believe my number of my Bibles and my opinions on them. And I don't mean like, theologically speaking. I mean like how a Bible is printed, the paper, that kind of thing. But this starts on page 626. It goes to page 668. That is 42 pages. And really, it's only the first two, maybe 2 pages or so. The first chapter, maybe a little bit in the second. First 2 chapters that really, the big narrative that Job is known for, that it talks about. Because sort of the overreaching story of Job is, here's Job, he's this holy man, he follows God, life's great. God and Satan have a conversation, and Satan's like, well, he's only good because you give him everything. And God's like, well, have at him. We'll see what his faith is like. Off to the races of pain and suffering. And that conversation is only this first chapter or two, because once you get past chapter 2, you don't really hear from Satan. It's pretty much Job and his friends and God and all this and that. But in that first chapter, in that conversation with Satan, we get to some interesting things. So you look in chapter 1 and the first 5 verses or so, I won't read those, are basically just talking about who Job is, how blessed he is, how holy he is, how blameless he is, how he shuns evil, and how God kind of has protection around him. And then we get to the interesting one, because it's so casual the way that it brings this in. There's no like big, huge metaphysical reason for this. There's not a, hey, I'm going to give this example of Job so you can learn from it and how to withstand evil in your own life. No, it's nothing like that. It's just kind of random in a way. Now listen how random this is. Now there was a day, now this gets interesting too, when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. Now that brings up, who are the sons of God? That could be a whole series in itself. That's the kind of thing that Joe Rogan loves to talk about. Who are the sons of God? Are they angels? Are they other gods? Is this like Greek myth territory? This is one of the reasons that a lot of people will go, what was this God in the Old Testament and what is this God in the New Testament? And what happened to these sons of God? To me, all very reasonable questions. You can have all the faith in the world and ask that question. So who are the sons of God? So the sons of God come to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came among them, which that brings up a crazy image of like, here are the sons of God. And again, different versions of the Bible will have different ways of calling them the sons of God. But whatever they are, it seems like they follow God. And here are these sons of God, whatever they are, divine creatures, angels, gods, really good humans, who knows. Among them, Satan. They're just hanging. What are they talking about? What are they doing? Are they shooing him away? Are they going, don't walk with us, Satan? Or are they like buddies? Is Satan like that, that friend that gets in trouble and they're like, but I still kind of like him. He's funny. Who knows? Because that's the way it's described. So Satan and the sons of God who are hanging show up to talk to the Lord. And the Lord looks at Satan, and you're kind of like, what are you doing here? And he goes, from where do you come? And so Satan answers the Lord, and he says, well, I've been going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth. So Satan's just been walking around the earth causing trouble, I'm sure. I'm sure he was not walking around admiring creation or, going, man, God's so good. He's probably walking around doing what Satan's going to do. And then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil. So it isn't Satan who brings up Job, it's God. God brings up Job. Satan doesn't bring him up. God does. And God says, look how good Job is. Wasn't that interesting? You know, that's kind of like one of us, someone comes to visit and goes, do you know about my child? Pretty good. That's how God's describing it. And then Satan answers the Lord and says, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. So he looks at God and he goes, well, that's great and all. You brought up this guy Job to, show me how great you are. But have you thought that maybe the reason that Job, and you go back to the beginning, is blameless and upright is because he's got everything? Because he's got all that cattle and he's got all that sheep and he's got all that kids and you have a hedge around him. Well, you gave anybody that, they're probably going, man, you're pretty good. So Satan, one could argue, tempts God. But now, stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power, and do not lay a hand on his person. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So, do what you want to him, just don't lay a hand on his person. Now think about what just happened there. And there's no other way to read it. I mean, you can find all kinds of books that give some kind of like hidden theological, psychological meaning to that. But it's written as straightforward as you could write something. Here's Satan and the sons of God walking the earth. Satan's doing Satan's thing. They come upon God. God brings up Job and says, hey, you seen Job out there? What a great guy he is. You know why he's so great? He loves me. And Satan goes, well, that's easy, because look at all that you've given him. What if something bad happened to him? And God goes, let's see. I don't know how you could describe that any way other than Satan tempted God and God took the bite, which that's going to have a lot of people in horror. But that's what it says. Okay, no, I'm going to deal later with maybe what that means, what's going on here. But right now I'm just trying to deal what's in front of us. And that's how it reads. You can't say it reads any other way. That's how it reads. And then now we're only halfway through chapter 1. That's like first page and we're going, and I'm still got my head on, what are the sons of God? So then what happens? Satan in the rest of that first chapter lets loose. He just lets loose. He rips into him. He takes his property. He kills his animals. Things get burnt up. His servants are killed. His children are killed. A great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the four corners of the house, and it fell on the young people. That's his family, and they are dead. And one escapes to tell Job. Now listen to what happens. Now this is the one, and I'm going to end on this today just for you to chew on as we ponder this, as we go through this. So Satan tempts God. God takes the bite. God says, do what you want. I'll show you how holy Job is, how much faith he has in me. Satan comes in there, death and destruction on all of Job's property. And Job, my man, I'll give you credit. Job hangs in there. So what's Job's response to that? Now he's not happy, but what's his response to that? And Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head. And he fell to the ground and he worshiped. So all that's taken away, and my man Job does not lose his faith. He hangs in there. He tears his robe. He shaves his head. He falls to the ground. He's getting holy. He's getting holier. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin, nor charge God with wrong. So far, I don't know if I'm going to go so far as to say so good, but so far, okay, hey, Satan comes, Job's not such a big deal. God goes, go for it. Satan takes all this stuff away. Job rises to the occasion, shaves his head, prays, and gives glory to God. Now you might think about this point, well, hey, we're over now. God's kind of proven his point. Job's a holy guy. Satan goes, yeah, maybe Job's who you said he was. Maybe he's holy and he loves you. But no, the suffering must continue. Job must be made an example of. So then what happens? Time passes. We don't really know how much time, which, and again, as I read this, is really interesting because it could have been like another 10 years that Job was suffering with, broken, his possessions destroyed, his children killed. So who knows how long Job suffered? And then it kind of starts the same way. And what's interesting, the language is almost exact. It says, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself. And this kind of begins to get to a little bit of hint where, is this a story? Is it a parable? Did it really happen? Because this might be how you'd write a story. I'm not sure it's how you would write a narrative because the wording, and again, I'm looking at a translation, the wording for the first time and the second time is exact. It's like word for word. And the Lord said to Satan, here in verse 2:2, and the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? In verse 1:7, and the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? From 7, Satan answered the Lord and said, for the previous one, Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and forth on the earth and from walking back. So just exactly the same. And then the Lord says to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? And it's weird how this is worded because it's almost like, how could you not consider my servant Job? Because we just had a whole chapter about him, which again, kind of I think gets to where I'm at with the whole book of Job, which is, what is it? Okay, what do we take from it? How serious do we take, like, this is exactly what happened? Because again, this isn't how you would talk. I mean, in chapter 2, when you just spent all of chapter 1 destroying everything, you're not going, have you considered you're going, hey, how's Job doing? How's his faith? But that's not what's said. It just repeats the first one. And then Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yes, all that a man has, he will give for his life. So then what Satan says is, yeah, but we didn't hurt him. We took his family, we took his possessions, and he still loved you. But what happens if we hurt him? Which the first time God had said, don't hurt him. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life. So now, think what just happened. Satan comes along. How you doing, God? Hey, do you know Job? He's pretty cool. Oh yeah, he's only that way because you gave him everything. Well, take it from him and you'll see how much faith he has. Okay, we'll see. Satan comes in, death, destruction, and then for what's probably a pretty long time, it's got to be a long time, because even if you take this at face value, they're only having that discussion again if it's been long enough that, like, maybe they forgot about it a little bit. And then God says, well, if that wasn't enough, do what you want to him, just don't kill him. But short of killing him, do what you want. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And then he took for himself a potsherd with which to scrape himself while he sat in the midst of the ashes. I mean, think about that. His body is being so destroyed, so God can show Satan how much faith he has. And Satan can try to destroy his faith. That he is taken like probably a broken piece of a pot, a little piece of ceramic, and he is scraping his skin that's dead. And there's so much of it, the ashes are falling around his body. Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Now, Job's hanging in there. And you would think, hey, maybe God's going to let up. But no. you get to the end of that, and at that point, it doesn't really say anything about God or Satan. It doesn't say they go, yep, you win, Job's pretty good, leave him alone, give him his stuff back. No, he's just sitting there in his own ashes. His wife is telling him, curse God, look what he's done for you. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then his friends come along, which begins all these conversations with his friends about evil and why this has happened to him and the kind of questions that we ask. But it starts like this. This is how low Job gets. He curses his birth. He curses his birth. So literally, he's so broken and beaten. He wishes he had never been born. Yet, he doesn't curse God. And we're supposed to be inspired by that. I don't know, man. It's tough. But I hope you see what I mean. Like, to me, you can only understand something if you face it head on. You read it for what it is. And it's tough. And why do I bring this up? People who've seen a lot of pain need real answers. They need humility. They don't need some happy clappy, it's going to be better, there's a reason for this. Because sometimes in the moment you can't see it. And you do wish you weren't born. One of the things I've noticed over the years at the trainings that I do is people will tell me some of the most horrible, incredible things they've experienced, and I don't know what to say to them, okay? To say to them, oh, find purpose in your pain, or, oh, there's a reason for it. It's so hollow. You know, what if it was like your young child and they were brutalized? I mean, think of some of the murders recently in the news. You know, young woman, I just read this yesterday, young 22-year-old woman, brutally raped, tortured, was alive for all of it, was conscious for all of it, probably praying out to God, praying out to her parents, praying for anything, and then life snuffed out. Where's the purpose in that? Where's the good in that? What's the lesson in that? Okay? And when people tell me things like that, what I do is I'm just with them, I just listen. Which again, a little foreshadowing. I think that is going to lead to me, what an example like Job does for us, what a story like Job does for us. And I'll just listen to him and I'll be present and I won't say anything. And then, you know, time will go on and sometimes I'll hear from him, I'll get an email, and it's interesting to me what often the email says, and it'll be like, hey, Sil, I appreciate, you know, the time you spent talking to me and what you said, and it was really helpful. And I'll think to myself, but I didn't say anything. I just stood there. I didn't know what to say. What you said was so like unbelievable. Like I'm like, oh, I feel inadequate to respond to this. And I just was there and I was present. But you know that presence, knowing you're not alone, knowing that you're sharing the suffering with somebody in the moment gave the moment meaning. And that allowed somebody to keep going. So I'm not sure if that's where Job's going to go talking to his friends, because I think they argue a lot. But there we are. That brings us up to Job chapter 3. That's the first two chapters. That's kind of the general narrative of the story. Kind of leaves you going, what the F? Like, really? You're playing games with Job? Which there's no other way to read it. So what's the point of these games? What do we learn from these? Well, that begins to be what most of Job is about. So, on Wrestling with God, part 2, we will begin to dig in to Job's conversations with his friends, trying to understand, why is this happening to me? What is God doing? What is the point of all this? And hopefully by the end of it, we'll have a little bit more understanding of just what suffering means and just what pain means. And maybe we won't actually understand it any better, but maybe we'll be able to face it a little bit stronger. I don't know. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll still be left kind of as I was at the beginning, just going, what are the sons of God? And how did God let the devil tempt him into this? And what's going on here? But who knows? Tune back and we shall see as we wrestle with Job a little bit more. Silouan, thanks for being here. Peace.